Please. Anyway, okay, let's do our message today. We are in the book of Genesis, and boy, we only have 32 verses to go. So that means we got less than a minute a verse. Okay, so a lot of important stuff we're talking about today. So, and we got food right after. So if your blood sugar's crashing, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. So we are in Genesis chapter 32, and we are at the point where Jacob has just parted with Laban. Laban had come because he was upset that Jacob had taken a powder without telling him. He hadn't had a chance to kiss the daughters, to kiss the kids. He was just upset with Jacob. The truth is he probably wouldn't have let Jacob go, or he would have sent him on his way impoverished and said, I'm keeping all the stuff. You can go wherever you want, but you ain't taking my kids and you ain't taking the stuff. And so Jacob knew his uncle well, and so he left. And so Laban caught up to him, took him 10 days to catch up to him, got caught up, and the Lord confronts him and says, don't even think about it. And Laban tells Jacob that. You know, God showed up yesterday and told me I'm not supposed to do anything. So that gave Jacob a little bit more confidence to deal with his uncle. Okay, so Laban has gone back home. Jacob's continued his trip down to return home in the land of Canaan. And he has these encounters which are really supernatural and interesting. We also learn about his change of heart right up front. But today I've just entitled this, it's the most important thing that happens. Saving Jacob's soul. God saves Jacob's soul. Pretty important part of Scripture today. And so we're going to jump right in because we've got 32 verses to go. Now, narrative is pretty quick, but we still have 32 verses to go. It says, so Jacob journeyed on his way, and the angels of God met with him. When he saw them, Jacob said, this is the host of God. Then he called the name of that place Mahanaim, a well-known city eventually in Gilead. So Jacob is on his way. Laban has left, and it says just the angels of God met him. Okay? It's just a throwaway phrase. The angels of God met him. And it doesn't tell us a whole lot about that. We know they're heavenly angels because it's the angels of God. It's clearly the heavenly angels. By the way, the word can mean messengers. The Hebrew word is malach, and it is a word which means messenger. In the very next verse, I believe it refers to human messenger, same word. Context tells you what it is. But when it says the angels of God, guess what? It's heavenly angels. Okay, it's God's supernatural beings who are coming to meet Jacob. And this is the host of God. A lot of your translations will say this is the camp of God. The only reason that the word translates camp is because a camp is a place where the host stays, the multitude, the congregation. It really refers to the group, and then because of the fact groups camp, it could be interpreted as camp. Here, I think the emphasis is on host, because I can't imagine angels needing to set up a camp. Okay, you think, what's a camp? Well, a camp is where they've got tents and they got... No. This is a host of angels. Jacob comes around the corner. It's like the elves. Elves. It's like the elves in the Lord of the Rings coming to help out. In the movie, not in the canon. Okay, but and they're marching and they're on their way to be able to march and help in one of the scenes. This is what I'm sure he has just seen. It's the same thing as when Elisha's servant was so afraid because the city was surrounded much later in the history of Israel. And Elisha says, Lord, open his eyes. And he looks and he sees the host of God all the way around the city. That is way outnumbering the number of enemies that had come out to take Elisha captive. And so all Elisha did was pray, and all the enemies turned blind. That seems to be one of God's tricks. He did that in Sodom, and he certainly did it at that time also, and they were able to lead them and say, hey, we know where you're supposed to go. Mahanaim means two hosts. Obviously, most of your translations will say two camps for the reasons that I've already explained. But Jacob had a host, and he hadn't set up camp yet, and there was another group or another host. By the way, the Lord is the one who leads armies or the one who leads hosts. Lord's Sabaoth, okay? And it is the same reference, if you will. These are the hosts of God. He leads them. And so Jacob names the place Mahanaim. And, when Jacob was leaving Canaan, he has an angelic encounter. The ladder, the messengers of God going up and down. At that time, I pointed out it could be human messengers, too, going up, because we go up into heaven through our prayer and we bring the response back down to earth. We are doing that today, by the way. We were walking up Jacob's ladder. Who's that? That's Jesus. And we are walking up today in prayer to go up into the heavenly places to get the response from God and bring them down and apply into people's lives. That's what we do. Do the angels, heavenly angels, do exactly the same thing? Yes. Because it's either human messengers or God's messengers. There's a reason the same word is used for humans and heavenly angels. It's because humans are also God's messengers as we do the purposes of God in our lives. I already told you the story about the woman who said to me, "You answered my prayer this morning. I was acting as a messenger of God because he wanted her heart to be comforted." And I didn't know that there was someone that had prayed that prayer on the way into the meeting, but it was someone who needed to hear that God had a purpose and that this is something big that's going on in the world today. Okay. Verses 3 to 5. At that time, Jacob sent messengers in front of him to his brother Esau in the region of Seir in the land of Edom. He gave them orders saying, "This is what you will say to my lord Esau. This is what your servant Jacob says. I have lived for a time with Laban and have waited there until now. I have cattle, donkeys, and sheep, as well as male and female servants. I have sent these messengers to inform my Lord and find favor in your eyes." So, Jacob now sends his own angels, his own messengers. These are clearly human messengers. He's about to come back in the land of Canaan, and he's thinking to himself, probably best not to surprise Esau. What if he shows up on a bad day? Esau's having a bad day. And all of a sudden, he sees Jacob. Well, you know what's happening next? Not a pleasant moment. And so he sends messengers to announce that he is there. Again, the word is malach, same word. And by the way, in the Greek language, it's angelos. It's the same thing. It can refer to heavenly or human messengers. It's the same thing. And it's where we get our word angel from, of course, the Greek. So anyway, he sent his messengers to go over by Esau in the region of Seir, in the land of Edom. And he says to Esau, "I've been away for a while, and I'm not empty-handed as I'm coming back." Because, of course, he was empty-handed when he left. I mean, he was certainly escorted by people from Isaac's retinue, but he didn't go with any personal wealth on that journey. That tells you a little bit that Isaac was still a bit torqued off at him. He's very clear. He only left with his staff as we get into his prayer a little bit later. But he's not coming back empty-handed. He's letting Esau know. By the way, it's really kind of funny that Esau was in the region of Seir, which sounds like the Hebrew for hairy. Remember, he was a hairy man. And also Edom is red. He was a reddish man, but also he ate the red stew. This is all play on words as we are hearing this, at least in the Hebrew. And so he says, "Hey, I'm not coming empty-handed." Now, it's really interesting in the Hebrew, and it's really difficult to do this in the English. But Jacob, as he's telling about his wealth, uses the singular. Yeah, I got a sheep. I got a cow. I got a servant. He's letting him know he's coming back, but he's letting him know, I'm coming back with more than just myself. But he doesn't really emphasize how big his wealth is as he's talking about this. And every translation has to put the plural on because it would sound so awful in English. But he really is minimizing a bit of what he has. And he says right up front, "I want to find favor in your eyes. I want a favorable reception," because he understands when he left Canaan, Esau was nursing a bitter grudge, intending to kill him when Isaac died. That's one of the reasons he left. That's the big reason he left. I mean, he went to get a wife, but that was basically a pretext to get him out of Esau's swing, if Esau got mad at him. And so anyway, he's letting Esau know, I'm in town. The messengers returned to Jacob saying, we made our way to your brother, to Esau. Even more, he is journeying to meet you, and 400 men are with him. Jacob was very afraid and uncertain. He divided the people who were with him, as well as the flocks, the cattle, and the camels, into two hosts. He said, if Esau comes to the one host and routs it, the host that remains will escape. This is serious. When you're determining, we'll have two hosts, two groups, and that way if one gets slaughtered, at least one can get away. That's sobering planning. Okay, but that's what he had to think. The good news was Esau's coming. That's great. The bad news was he was bringing 400 men. That's an army. Okay, and that is something that Jacob certainly could not have stood against. He was wealthy, but in 6 years he had not yet had a trained retinue of people. And especially up against Esau, who was an outdoorsman and a warrior and all of those things. Jacob was no slouch himself. We'll be reminded of that in just a minute. But whether his retinue was trained as a military cohort is a way open question, especially since he had been under the covering of Laban and civilization back where he came from. And so he may not have had the ability to stand up. In fact, we know he didn't have the ability. He thought they were all going to get slaughtered. So he prepares in a very sobering way. Can you imagine dividing? Just imagine that. You're saying, okay, I've got this retinue. Now who am I going to put where? Because I may be saying goodbye to the people I put in one side, the side that he's not in. That's sobering stuff. It says he was afraid and uncertain, very afraid and uncertain. The word for uncertain often is one that says he cramped up. Okay, it's a word that refers to that. And what it basically means is that he didn't know what to do. He was kind of frozen in fear. And now he needed to make some decisions. That's how much he was experiencing fear. Keep that in mind as we see some of the events that unfold as we see the rest of the story go. Because if you know right up front, we're told he's very afraid and he was cramping up from fear. And I don't think it means physical cramps. I mean, he just didn't know which way to go. He was frozen in fear. And so that will help us understand the context of what we're looking at. Jacob also prayed, God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, Yahweh, the one who said to me, return to your land and to your relatives, and I will deal well with you. I do not deserve all the acts of loving kindness and faithfulness which you have done for your servant. For I crossed over the Jordan River with my staff, but now I am two hosts. Please rescue me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. I am afraid of him, that when he comes he will kill me, as well as the mothers with the sons. You did say, I will certainly deal well with you and establish your seed as the sand of the sea, which are too numerous to be counted. Do you hear he's holding God to his promises? He's saying, this is what you told me, and I responded, and I answered, and now look what's happening. Help! Because he's So he prays to Yahweh. That's the personal name for God, obviously, as we've talked about many, many different times. Most often in the Bible translated capital L-O-R-D. But it's the tetragrammaton, which is the Hebrew at the end. It's just 4 letters. And some translations have called it Jehovah in the past. That's almost an impossible pronunciation. But Yahweh is the way that it was most likely pronounced. That's the majority of Hebrew scholarship. And of course, the Jewish people don't pronounce it, which is why most Bible translations won't write it out. And I think that if God cared enough to tell Moses what his personal name meant, Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate, gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love, I think if he cared enough to tell Moses what his name meant, it's probably important for us to know his name. So I won't follow the conventions when I translate. So he prays to Yahweh, And he recognizes the hand of God in his life. And he's pointing out, I don't deserve this. Everything that you've done, I don't deserve. It means Jacob's taking a look at himself and realizing, I've done some messy stuff. By the way, would he be reminded of that after 20 years coming back to talk to his brother? Do you think he was proud of taking the birthright for a bunch of stew? A bowl? I mean, would you, after 20 years, looking back and saying it sounded like a good idea at the time, but boy, am I embarrassed, especially when you ended up fleeing for your life after you deceived your father. Do you think he was maybe a little concerned about that? I think that we have a man who is in the midst of a life crisis who is going, man, I've really messed up. And he says, I don't deserve everything that you've given to me, but you did make me some promises, and those promises are important. And so based upon those promises, please protect us from my brother. And he uses God's promises to build his prayer. That's what we should be doing. We use the biblical promises to build our prayers, and we build any personal promises that we know that God has given us to build our prayers. When I pray for things, it's a lot more faith building when God has given a specific promise that I can grab onto and say, you said this. Because I'm reminding myself that I can pray in faith right now. God didn't forget the promise, by the way. He's well aware of it. He loves for us to rehearse them to him, though, because he knows it builds our faith. So he prayed there that night. Then he took from what had come into his hand for a gift for his brother Esau. That's real picturesque. What had come into his hand? He sent 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 nursing camels and their calves, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 male donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. By anyone's count, that's a lot of animals. He gave them into the hand of his servants and separated them group by group. He said to his servants, pass over ahead of me and make a space between each group. He instructed the first group, saying, when my brother Esau meets you and questions you, asking, to whom do you belong, and where are you going, and who owns the animals who are in front of you? You respond, they belong to your servant, to Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord, to Esau, and look, he is also behind us. He also instructed the second group as well as the third group, and even all those who walked behind the herd, saying, you shall speak the same things to Esau when you find him. You shall also say, look, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I shall make amends to him with the gift that is going before me. Then afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will receive me in a friendly manner. This is demonstrating a heart change. This is not Jacob, the grasping one who grasps onto the heel of Esau and tries to take everything from him. There's over 550 animals mentioned in that list. And we don't get all the numbers because it's and their calves for the camels. I don't know who you were. Giving 550 animals is a princely gift. It's so over the top, it just isn't done. Esau tried to give them back later on. And Jacob wouldn't take them because his nature had changed. He wasn't, no, I'm not taking it back. I gave it to you. If you want to give them away, feel free, but I'm not taking them back, right? And that's sometimes how we do things. When God tells us to give something, we give it or we do it. And if they say, well, we don't have a way to process this, I'm going to do with it what you will. But I'm not going to take it back. This is by the direction of the Lord. And in Jacob's case, it was a change of heart, which was being demonstrated. So Jacob's plan was to send gifts, and the gifts were there to be able to help make amends. He's giving clear instructions to everyone, even the ones who walked behind just in case Esau questioned them. Not just the lead, but the guys who walked behind and made sure that the animals stayed. Do you know what it's like to drive 550 animals? Me either. But it's a big deal. Okay, this is a big deal. And, divided in different groups, of course, so they weren't all 550 at once. But they were told, he said very carefully what they were supposed to say to Esau. And he says, I'm making amends. Now, I want to let you know, a lot of commentators and translations say this is a demonstration of Jacob trying to manipulate. This is Jacob trying to make amends. Okay, this is a changed Jacob, which is what we are shown in the sections that are coming. This man is a changed man. He's not the same guy who left Canaan. He's a man whose heart has been touched by God in a brand new way, and right now he is responding in his best. He's thinking, what's the best way for me to do this? And he's thinking, you know what? I took the birthright for a bowl of stew, and I got the blessing of my father for another little bit of food, and, deceiving him, and I am going to send a gift that only a king would get, so that Esau knows that I'm truly sorry for what I did. You can't receive a gift that big without realizing this man's sincere. And that was the purpose. I do not think this reflects badly on Jacob at all. I think it reflects incredibly well on Jacob. And by the way, we are taught to put the best interpretation on everything in the Bible, are we not? So when someone says that this was a sign of manipulating Jacob, when the text doesn't say that at all, probably not the best interpretation of this section of Scripture. So anyway, here we go. So the gifts crossed over before him, that's all the animals, but he stayed that night in the camp. Jacob rose that very night and took his 2 wives, his 2 handmaids, and his 11 children, don't know where Dinah went, and crossed over the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them over the torrent. He also sent the things that belonged to him. So Jacob sends the gift, which is the 550 plus animals. And he sends the gift. They cross over the river, and because, that's where they are. They're by the Jabbok River. And he spent the night in the camp after he had sent the gift across, but obviously he was having some sleep issues. You understand, he thinks he might get slaughtered the next day. This weighed heavily on him, not just for his own life, but the life of all the kids and the families and the wives. All of those things would be weighing heavily on him. So he got up in the middle of the night, and he sent everyone over the Jabbok, get them on their way, and he also sent all the things that belonged to him. And so that's what he did. Sleeping trouble, so he sent everyone across. And here's a map of where he was. There is, you see the Sea of Galilee to the north there, and the Dead Sea's to the south, and Salem on the left of the Dead Sea. That's the site of Jerusalem in the future. But you can see right about where Mahanaim is, and Penuel, which is a city that also was there, at least a site. And then there's the Jabbok River. You can see it's a relatively long river. It goes through gorges and hills, and it's very rugged and picturesque. Here's the modern day look at the stream. You can see it's this area would be fordable, except for all the rocks in the river. That would make it very difficult. Here's another scene where it'd be a lot easier to cross, and a little bit. I don't know if this is up or down river, but wherever it is, it's a torrent. It's a fast-flowing stream, even to this day. But there are shallow areas like this where they would be able to cross relatively easily. So Jacob remained behind alone. Now, it looks like he went across the river and he came back, and he was behind alone, maybe because the Lord was urging him. But it says a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When the man saw that he was not prevailing over him, he struck the hollow of his hip, and the hollow of Jacob's hip was dislocated as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let go of me, for the dawn is breaking." But he responded, "I will not let go of you unless you bless me." The man said to him, "What's your name?" He responded, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name will not be Jacob any longer, but Israel, for you have contended with God and with men and have prevailed. This is one of those, this is almost as weird as the angels. He's walking along and suddenly he sees a host of angels. And now he goes back across the river. He's by himself, and he starts wrestling with a guy. How did they get into this wrestling match? What led up to it? Maybe the guy just showed up and started wailing on him. I don't know. Now, it turns out it's the angel of the Lord, which is, personification of God that he's wrestling with. But, we're talking about, this is just, wouldn't you like to have the details? Someday we'll know this, okay? Someday, I was talking to someone on Friday night about the sea of glass in front of the throne and how we're going to be seeing God's grace working out in everybody's life that's in heaven. And we're going to be able to see the videos of our own lives and how God moved in our lives. And it's and so this is going to be one we're definitely going to have a chance to see and figure out the details. And then you'll be able to say, was the picture that Randy was painting correct, or did he miss some stuff? Okay. So anyway, because I have no idea how the fight started, the wrestling match, but it did. And anyway, so they're having this wrestling match, and things aren't going real well. Jacob was wrestling, and the man couldn't prevail against him. By the way, Jacob was a strong guy. Remember when he first went to Canaan, he took that stone which is over the well by himself that all the shepherds would grab together and remove. He did it himself. That tells you that he was this is almost like a Samson character. We don't think of him that way, but he's wrestling with God and prevailing. Or at least not losing. And that lets you know that he's doing okay. And so it gets to the point where the man, it says some translations, the word can mean touch or strike. In a wrestling match, strike would be a better word because it's just, he dislocated his hip. That usually takes a blow. Could be supernatural, just a touch, but it's talking about something that was disabling for Jacob for the rest of his life. So there had been a dislocation. By the way, that'd be somewhere, we're going to find out in a little bit, that's probably by the sciatic nerve, the hollow where the sciatic nerve goes through. And I know there are, if any of you have ever had issues with your sciatic nerve, you know why Jacob was limping after this, because it could be a big deal. So he said, they were having this issue, and he was trying to get Jacob to release him, right? Let go of me. Dawn is coming. And that is, okay. The Mishnah says the angel wanted to go join the heavenly choir before daybreak. That's kind of cute, right? But for whatever reason, he wanted to get away by daybreak, and Jacob is like saying, I'm not going to let you go. I want a blessing, because he's figured out by this time that this isn't just a human being. It's another. Remember, he had just had a meeting with the hosts of heaven, and so he knows angels are around, and he's figuring this out, and he certainly knows it's a supernatural encounter. And he says, I need you to bless me. And so he says, okay, what's your name? Jacob. By the way, did he know Jacob's name? But he was getting Jacob to say it. Because by saying it, Jacob is reminded of what it means, one who grasps the heel or supplants. And the angel of God says, well, it's going to be Israel from now on. Abram went to Abraham, Sarai went to Sarah, and now Jacob went to Israel, one who prevails, one who contends. And he is the overcomer. Boy, that's a picture of what the church is supposed to be, the overcomer. Jacob wanted a blessing, and he becomes Israel, who is one who overcomes or one who prevails with God. Then Jacob pressed him and said, please tell me your name. But he responded, why are you asking for my name? Then he blessed him there. Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my soul was saved. The sun rose upon him as he crossed over Penuel. He was limping upon his hip. Because of this, to this day, the sons of Israel do not eat the sinew connected to the hip, which is in the socket of the hip, because he struck the hollow of Jacob's hip in the sinew of the hip. That's almost a poem. Okay. Anyway, so we've got Jacob asked his name. Well, you asked my name. Now I'm asking your name. That same thing happened when Samson's parents were told by an angel of the Lord, or the angel of the Lord, that Samson was going to be born. And they said, what's your name? And he said, why would you ask that? You know who I am. And that's the same thing here. If the person you're asking the name, who you know is angelic, doesn't give you the name, you're dealing with something a little bit more than a normal angel. And so he blessed Jacob there. That's a nice blessing. And Jacob called the place Peniel, which means face of God. And I've seen God face to face. And here's the key phrase: my soul was saved. That's literally what the Hebrew says. My nephesh, my soul was saved. And that speaks about transformation. The man knew God had been changing him through all the years with Laban, so that now he's a different man. And he says, my soul was saved. God has come and visited me and finished his work and blessed me. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean that Jacob was perfect after this. He certainly wasn't. He certainly had a lot of issues in his life. But this is a man who did not have the Holy Spirit dwelling in him like we have. I was reminded of this the other day. The least in the kingdom of God is greater than the greatest of the Old Testament heroes, prophets. The least. Now, I'm looking at that and going, my goodness. We look at these guys as heroes, and God says, if you're walking in the kingdom, and by the way, walking in the kingdom is not just being a Christian, it's manifesting the power and the presence of God, but that's something that all of us can do. And he says, that's greater than any of these Old Testament heroes. But boy, we're talking about a guy who, apart from the power of the Spirit in his life, in the way that we have it, was doing some amazing things and having some heartfelt changes in his life. By the way, it can be spelled Peniel or Penuel. In the first verse, it's Peniel. In the second verse, it's Penuel. And through the rest of the Old Testament, it's Penuel. However, in popular Christianity, it's always referred to as Peniel, and so you can't. I was going to change it to Penuel in the first reference to, and just footnote it, and I thought, you're risking people's wrath. We hate to have it, the bait and switch thing happen, right? We go, wait a minute, what happened to Peniel? So it's. But like I said, for the rest of the our Old Testament, it's Penuel, not Peniel. It's only mentioned once as Peniel, but it means face of God. And then this is the weirdest thing. I have to figure this out. I mean, okay, I want you to. Jacob is limping. Okay, he comes back to everyone limping. Who was it who first said, let's commemorate that by not eating the tendon connected to the hip? Would you do that? Now remember, these were people who were around herds, which means they slaughtered animals a lot. They knew what was going on in Jacob's body, that there was something going on, because they knew there were ligaments and muscles and tendons. The word translated sinew doesn't generally refer to muscle. We eat muscle. Muscle is meat. We don't usually eat tendons, sinews, because that stuff is so tough. That's the stuff that you don't want in your meat. Unless you're going to cook it for about 10 hours and reduce it to its constituency. But someone, they decided, you know what? I think we need to celebrate this by not eating the sinew. And I'm thinking, who does that? Well, Jacob's sons. They did it. They said, let's honor Dad by doing this. And it was a small thing, but it was a way for them to say this was an important thing that happened to Jacob along the walk of his life. And that's the most important part, the commemoration of it. I might have personally had cake. Speaking of which, here's a guy whose life was changed radically. Each and every one of us have had moments where our lives have changed radically. Jacob's soul was saved, whatever that means. His course was changed. And God did something in him that was amazing. And he does the same thing in us. First, when we're saved, when he changes us from darkness to light. Secondly, when he moves us along the way, when he helps us rise above our foolishness and our immaturity and gaining wisdom every step of the way. There are times which our eyes are opened as Christians in a brand new way. So we look back and go, my goodness, I knew so little, and God has changed me so much. Well, you know what he was experiencing. And next week, we're going to have a chance to see him interchanging with Esau. We're going to see the change in his life. And we're going to see even more how his heart was being directed by God. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity. I ask that your grace would be on us and that we as your people would celebrate the changes that you have made in our lives always. Amen.